back to the run home with Joel and Fletch, all thanks to Hyundai. Hyundai's end of financial year event now on. T's and C's apply. And Blunston step into the new financial year with Blunston. Don't forget, you can catch up with many of our big chats. We had Matty Johns on moments ago. We've now got a big one with Stephen Drill for True Crime Tuesday. So without further ado, let's pull the trigger. No pun intended.
Tuesdays on the run home with Joel and Fletch, we discuss, dissect and delve into crimes of the past. It's time for True Crime Tuesday.
Okay, in the studio, come up from Melbourne, investigative reporter and host of the Cocaine Inc. podcast, Stephen Drill. G'day, Stephen.
Thanks for having me, guys.
How are you, mate? Thanks for coming up and doing this with us. Now, Cocaine Inc. is the podcast inside the global drug business. So it's a collaboration with News Corp Australia and The Times and Sunday Times in the UK. And I understand the podcast is number 2 in the UK.
It's done all right in the last few days. People like listening to, people like talking about cocaine. And I mean, you guys are having me on as well. And it just is everywhere. And it's a real good talking point because people seem to think it's okay to use. And it's I reckon it's almost as common as marijuana now. Or people, it's as socially acceptable, really. But there are some pretty big costs for it. They're being paid by people in Colombia, and then also a few people get caught in the crossfire as well.
So, we had you on 18 months ago, and you were saying that you actually went over to Colombia.
Yeah, we went to Colombia and Mexico and Panama. We actually went and met the Colombian National Police, and they took us to where they actually grow cocaine in the mountains. It grows at about 6,000 feet above sea level, so it's a quite specific range, and that's why Colombia is the source of it, because it doesn't really grow anywhere else other than Bolivia and Peru. So it's the Andean Mountains is the spot where it grows. And now in the last 10 years, the actual production of it's doubled. There's more plants now than there ever was because they stopped actually spraying. They used to have an aerial spray system where they like a herbicide.
Yeah. Oh, really?
And then
the coppers would do this?
Coppers would do that, funded by the Americans. And then they've gone, hang on, this is not great for people in Colombia. It could get into the waterways, and they've stopped that. And since that's happened, it's just exploded.
So you go to this farm, or the cocaine farms. Do you watch everything from go to woe?
Yeah, you can see you can actually see how they produce it, and it's not great.
No.
You know, probably some of your listeners out there maybe have done a bit of cocaine in the last couple of weeks, or might be doing it on Saturday night. If you're thinking it's a nice clean product, it's not.
Okay, tell us what happens.
So they get out a whippersnipper. So some poor bloke, usually from Venezuela now, because
they got like a Jim's over there, like a Jim's mowing or something.
I don't know if they do have a Jim's mowing, but they might have used some old Jim's mowing equipment. Because they get out a whippersnipper and they cut the leaves with a whippersnipper, make it nice and fine into almost like a paste, like all like grass clippings, I suppose. Then they pour that into a big vat of petrol, just basic petrol, unleaded, just throw it in, and it stinks. And then over time, that separates out the cocaine paste, the cocaine hydrochloride, which is the active ingredient in it. And then they put that into another bath of hydrochloric acid, and then they add cement paste, like cement dust, into it.
Like legit cement paste?
Yeah, cement dust. Like cement dust, to thicken it. And then that comes into a paste, and then they dry it out, and that's where it gets that sort of white colour in the end.
Okay, so then we've got a kilo of it. You know, they pack it up in a kilo?
Wrapped in a kilo. Was washing up on Sydney's beaches a couple of months ago.
Yes. How much would that be?
In Colombia, less than $1,000. So
the farmer, they do all the work?
They're getting absolutely stitched.
And that's $1,000, and then what happens? Where does it go from there? I'm saying to come back to Australia.
Well, it can go lots of different ways. It's not like there's a sort of, you can't just go and drop it in Oz Post and and track your order. Although, actually, they do that, but we'll come back to that. So it can start in Colombia. Often now, America's really tightened down, and the Colombian authorities have tightened up on coke.
So has it slowed down going into the US?
It has slowed. Well, it's just harder. So, but what's meant is instead of going up to the north of Colombia, it's going across the mountains into Brazil, and to the right, and then it's going across into Ecuador as well. So they've just kind of changed the smuggling routes, and it's also going down into Paraguay through the Parana River. They're actually taking it all the way down there, and then they'll swing it into America, and then they'll swing it into Europe. A lot of cocaine goes to Canada as well, but it kind of like gets bounced around like a pinball. They don't just go to try and avoid authorities. They won't say, right, here's this ship from South America, and it goes straight to Colombia. They might go America, so they might go Colombia to Hong Kong, to Europe, to Liverpool. there was some cocaine in Ireland that was picked up, and that had sat in Canada for 4 months before it was moved on.
Okay, so how would it come to Australia then? Because as you mentioned just before, during summer it was washing up everywhere, from the north, from Newcastle as far down to Bega.
Well, so in that case, it was called Operation Groot. The cocaine had come across. It was dropped off at Moreton Island, just off Moreton Island. So they have a big ship which will bring it in, say up to near the coast of Australia, like a big tanker, and then they'll drop it off to a mothership, a daughter ship rather, like a mothership daughter ship setup. In that case, they kind of stuffed it up, and it didn't quite get picked up. So the cocaine went everywhere.
Right.
But what they would normally do is just drop it off, say, to a ship off the coast, and then that'll be picked up and stored in Australia. Sometimes they have ships going into harbours, and it's actually attached to the bottom of the hull of a ship, hull attachment. But often it's just in a container. So in the refrigeration units of the containers, they'll shove the cocaine in there because that's harder to see. And if you're looking at a shipping container, this is great radio, I know, but at the end of it, there's the air conditioning unit, and there's a bit of a gap. And so they can shove the cocaine in the gaps among the air conditioning unit. But sometimes it's just literally thrown in as bags into a shipping container because they don't. If they've got someone corrupt at the other end, if they know there's someone in Newcastle Port or in Brisbane or wherever, they'll be like, all right, this is container one, and that just gets pushed off, and it doesn't get checked.
And so, Stephen, it's now Australia's supply of cocaine going to Australia is its highest in 30 years.
Yeah,
is it because of the demand or because we pay so much for it?
Bit of both. I think a lot of it is the supply. It's got so much. Well, there's a few things actually. The supply has got so much bigger, so there's more of it going to come. But it is the price we're paying. We're paying $3.50 a gram, or probably even more sometimes. I spoke to someone the other week who said it could be as much as $500 a gram if you're getting quote good coke, if its purity is high. Now, the stuff sold on the streets of Sydney, it could be as low as 22% cocaine, and it's about as high as 60% because they actually cut it with a lot of crap.
So after it's got cement dust in it, petrol, you're saying then it gets cut again.
Then it gets cut again because if you bring in your, if you've got your kilo that you've paid $200,000 for, you want to make that kilo go. Say if you had 10% bulk to it, well that's now worth $220, and you can spread that money out a lot further. So I know there's even cocaine purity testing kits that people are getting online. Some cops have been seizing them recently, but it's just they've got levamisole in it. It's a worm killer in cattle and chickens. That's what's added to it. And then there's a painkiller that they add to it as well because levamisole kind of looks a little bit like cocaine, so it's harder to check.
So are they doing that just to like fluff it up, or is that to give you a bit of a hit as well?
Fluff it up, and then the painkiller stuff is another way of like making it stretched a little bit further. It's kind of like minestrone soup, just making it go.
Yeah.
So 1 in 8 people, the numbers say that in 18 to 24, 1 in 8 people.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's like 12%. It's about 1 million people in the last year, according to a national survey, actually admitted to using cocaine.
Right.
Now, how many people don't admit to using cocaine?
Yeah.
So it's probably a bit higher.
So tell us about the kingpins. So who's obviously Cocaine Inc. inside the global drug business? Who are the main participants here?
There's been a bit of a shift in the sort of top of the tree of Australia's cocaine trade. There was Hakanai and a fellow called Mark Buttle were at the top of it. They're from the Comanchero Bikie Club, but they've been arrested. They've been picked up by the police, and they'll be facing court, and they'll be pleading not guilty, and we are not presuming anything against those two gentlemen. That'll go through the courts. But Angelo Pendelli, he's the Hells Angels boss. He was here in Sydney. He just sold his house, his apartment on the water for $8 million last year.
Wow!
So he's gone offshore. They tried to pick him up on failing to lodge a tax return in 2017, and that failed. That court case, and then he just left the country. He's been based in Dubai, and now he's become mates with the Kinahan clan. Now these are Irish guys that I hadn't heard of really until I started looking into this podcast, but. The Kinahans have been around for 30 years, and they are kind of the biggest players in European cocaine. They started off doing heroin in Dublin in the 80s rather, and they've built the way up. Just little street deals, and became bigger and bigger and bigger. And Christy Kinahan is the dad. He was jailed a few times, and when he was in jail, he was learning Arabic, he was learning French. he used that time in jail to become a mastermind of the cocaine trade, and now he's become mates with Bandelli, and they were suspected, the two of them, of being involved in this cocaine shipment that was seized in Ireland in December 19, 300 kilos of coke picked up in Limerick.
Wow.
So what it's showing is that because the money to be made here in Australia from cocaine is so high, well, the Irish, these big criminals want to work with Australian crooks because they've got the distribution networks here. So it's a gateway. You know? It's like a multinational business.
When you say it's only grown in one area, or basically in Colombia,
Colombia, Peru,
Bolivia, Panama.
It's
how many? Is there only one cartel per country?
No. Well, there was a group called FARC, which was the FARC.
Yeah.
I'm not swearing on the radio.
No.
They were the revolutionaries in Colombia. They actually controlled a fair bit of the area, but there was a peace deal was done in 2016, and when that happened, they've kind of got a lot more. There's no-go areas in Colombia now. They control the mountain areas where the cocaine is grown. But what's happened since FARC has kind of had this peace deal is everyone else has jumped in. So we've got the Albanians have come into Ecuador. We've got the Ndrangheta, who used to control 70% of the cocaine trade. They're involved there in Colombia as well. There's actually a fair bit of a fight on for control of the cocaine trade there because it's become a bit decentralised.
But if they know them, if they know who they are, why can't they? Are they almost powerless, the local authorities, or?
It's actually geography, because if you're in Colombia or say in Brazil, I know that there's a lot of cocaine now coming from Brazil. You're looking at it, you've got heavily armed, well-motivated, well-trained guerrillas, well-trained people who run the cocaine trade. Are you going to go and send out your young soldiers with poorer weapons to go and try and fight up a hill when they've got the advantage of the actual height to go and take you out? Well, they're not going to sacrifice all the lives of their border force people just so people in Australia or America don't do cocaine. So it's kind of like they sort of go, well, it's not necessarily a problem. I know. And
plus all the corruption that'll be there.
Well, but if you're living in a small area in Colombia, you're 10 hours away from the capital. You've got a person with a gun to your head. What are you going to do?
Yeah. So you know how the farmer's getting it for $1,000?
Oh,
or whatever it is.
That's after it's done. The farmers are getting nothing. Yeah.
The cartels then get it. So what do they? Okay. Do they sell? How much do they sell it for?
$200,000.
Oh, straight off the bat.
Yeah.
So if there's an Aussie, they go over to Colombia and they say, I want a kilo. It's going to cost you $200.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's $200 around the world.
In Australia. So that's
but not what I'm saying is, does the cartel then go, right, it was $200, you're from Australia, I'm going to sell it to you for $200. You're from Miami, so I'm going to sell it to you for $50. Is that how it works?
Well, it's supply and demand, where you can get it, where you can smuggle it as well, because you might have.
And that's their job, or is it the?
Well, there's things called doors. So whoever controls the corrupt border official or the corrupt airport worker, they're the key people, because if you can get that, then you can get as much drugs as you want into a country. So there's a real cost.
But you're taking all the risk then. You're the one taking the risk. Shouldn't you get it cheaper?
Yeah, but see, what's happened, particularly with ice, is there was I won't name this person, but
drug ice.
A drug ice. So there was an ice company, an ice drug wholesaler, who guaranteed the shipments. They said, if it gets caught, I don't care. It's fine.
Where does that mostly come from?
That comes from the Golden Triangle, sort of Myanmar, Burma, Laos, that area there.
Okay. Same dudes.
But that's starting to different dudes. That's
different dudes running that.
Different, yeah, because that's Asian triads who are sort of controlling the ice trade.
It's heavy.
But yeah, with Colombia, so I think that's to be careful what I say. But there are some times when cocaine is lost, then people get pretty angry about that. Now,
I can imagine.
There was a guy who was killed in Melbourne, John Latore, and there's some suggestions that he may have been killed because there was a cocaine shipment from Papua New Guinea that didn't arrive in Australia. They put the cocaine on to the aircraft. They overfilled the aircraft and it crashed.
Wow.
And that's caused some concerns now. But that's another factor is it's not, when you say how does it get to Australia, sometimes there's a heck of a lot of cocaine just sitting in the mountains in Papua New Guinea. So it gets sent across from Colombia, dropped off in Papua New Guinea, and then they wait and hold it. So you're still paying you $350 a gram here in Australia because they're keeping a floor on the price. They're not bringing in
And
tons and tons
they're
at
doing
once.
that on
They're
purpose.
drip feeding it in.
So they're not doing that because they can't get it in. They're just
No.
it is like a proper business.
It's a proper business.
It's the old diamonds, isn't it? De Beers had
Yeah.
unlimited diamonds,
Yeah.
but by holding it back, it provides the worth, doesn't it? Just a quick one. So how are they transferring the cash?
Now that's the question. That's why the Kinahan's are important, because there's now bear with me. You think of Margot Robbie in the bath in The Big Short.
Yep.
This is the Islamic banking system.
Am I still thinking about it?
You can if you want. The Hawala banking system is it's called offsetting. So previously, 100 years ago, you didn't have Western Union, you didn't have anything else. So you would have people who have debts in one country. So you've bought some cocaine from someone in Hong Kong, right? You want to pay. You go and say you give money to someone in Australia who there's your $1 million. Here it is over there. I've paid someone in Australia for that. They have a contact in Hong Kong who goes to someone else and gets the $1 million from their contact, and then the debt gets moved across. So the money actually never moves from direct from
point
Hong
A to
Kong
point B.
There's a middleman in the middle who just is a bank that takes on debt and moves the cash. So there's no trace of it, and that's where the Kinahans have become really, really important, because they're doing a lot of that Hawala banking to move cash for criminals, and they're really tied in with the Iranian authorities. There's some suggestions that they've been funding Hezbollah because they've been actually banned by the US, and I sort of thought, why does the US really care about an Irish group of criminals?
What do you mean they've been banned by the US?
So they've got a $7 million bounty on their heads by the USDA. So there's a reward if you can provide information to get the Kinahans arrested.
Right,
you get $7 million Australian. Wow. But that's because they're funding terrorism. They're funding Hezbollah. They've been able to help Iran get around the sanctions that the Americans have put in place. So
heavy, isn't it?
Then it's big cash.
Stephen, what about all this, the chat about there's no cash out there anymore?
There's more cash than there ever was.
Yeah, so people are saying there's no ATMs, we're closing down banks. These bikies can still get access to plenty of cash.
There's people. A guy pleaded guilty to having $6 million cash in Perth at his mum's house. He used it as a safe house a couple of years ago. So it's around. The number of $100 notes in circulation is through the roof.
But no one can get them here. So how isn't that a way the government? Because there's talk that the government want to decentralise cash and do all that sort of stuff. And is there talk about Bitcoin? They're paying in
they
cryptocurrency.
Are paying Bitcoin as well. That's moving cash around. But I mean, there's still, if you're in this market, you're not going to go and pay for your cocaine on your pay ID, eh?
No.
You have to have cash. So someone's getting it from somewhere. But when it does get to that bulk amount, they do move it in cryptocurrency as well, which makes it pretty hard to track.
Gotcha.
It's not impossible to track. It's just harder to track because it still has a little imprint on it.
So we talk about, you see those shows in the 80s when Ronald Reagan's saying the war on drugs. They've just given up, have they? The Yanks just given up?
No, well, they haven't, because they've really cracked down on the north of Colombia, stopping those routes coming out of there. Their big problem, though, is Mexico. Now, we've got a big moat around us. It's pretty hard to get cocaine or any drugs into Australia. Over there, I've been to Tijuana where the wall is. There's just tunnels underneath it. They've got tons and tons of drugs coming in, and they've also got a really big problem with fentanyl. So the Mexican cartels have gone. Cocaine's pretty hard to make. Yeah, you've got to grow the thing. It's got to be cut. It's got to be done. This takes a while. Fentanyl, it's just
which is what? What's
fentanyl? It's like it's an opioid. It's about 50 times stronger than heroin, and 2 milligrams of it will kill you.
Brian, I had never seen anything like it.
But are they putting that in the coke?
Yes, that has happened in America. Yeah,
just to fluff it up again, or
to make it more addictive. If you want the fentanyl, because the fentanyl is really addictive, so you get on the coke, and people are presented at hospital in America going, I've been having coke, and it's like I've had these bad health effects, and they've done the blood tests, and it's like, no, you've been having fentanyl.
Well, this fentanyl, right? Yeah. We went to San Francisco late last year, and you literally go from a beautiful, beautiful city to downtown Deadshittville, and they're like zombies. They look like there's on this fentanyl. They look like zombies.
But they're the homeless people I see. How are they affording the cocaine there?
Fentanyl is really cheap though. That's
so they're selling cocaine as They're selling fentanyl disguised as cocaine.
Yeah, so that's to get them more addicted, but there is a fentanyl market, and also fentanyl can come in like a pill. So, in America particularly, there's like a real big culture of taking, painkillers and oxycodone and that sort of stuff. So people are just taking it as a pill, and you've got high university students, first time they've ever used it, bang, they're out. 110,000 people.
It's very interesting seeing about the tradies. The tradies get a mention about here. So tradies are saying 1 in 8.
Well, 1 in 8.
Is that 1 in 8 just young people?
It was 1 in 8 young people, but the amount there's Flinders University research showing that the amount of tradies doing cocaine as a percentage has doubled in 5 years. So
and the price of coke hasn't come down.
No, but
getting paid more.
Tradies are getting paid pretty well, and then if I was a drug dealer, I'm going to go where the money is. So I'm going to try and get people who are on job sites who are making good cash to become my customers.
Would you know how much is getting through into Australia?
So,
Roughly,
there's about 2,000 tonnes consumed in Australia each year.
2,000 tonne.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Wow,
it's a lot.
So, okay, tell me this: how much gets pinched?
About 25%.
Oh, is that all?
Yeah.
They're only getting 25% of it.
25%. And there is a study saying to actually slow the market down, you'd need to get 60 or 70% to actually sort of have a real dent. So 25%, 1 in 4, well, if you lose a shipment, it's not great, but you're not going to go bankrupt.
It's all built into their cost probably, isn't it?
Yeah, well, but the problem is you get people become a bit erratic and they're not probably thinking quite straight. And it becomes about ego, and when people feel like they've been ripped off, so it's not like there's receipts in this trade. If you've upset somebody, you might get a bullet.
So every kilo that comes in, do you think it's brought in by one of those, like the Kinahans or the Hells Angels?
Well, it's all part of a network. There's a thing called the Aussie cartel because all the bikie gangs went, why are we fighting with each other? How about we go and join forces and actually work it out? And the wholesale level is kind of pretty stable. When it gets down to the street level, that's when we've seen in Sydney in the last few years 23 murders, and that was sparked by, we're told, a dispute over a cocaine shipment that went missing. So once it gets into the tit for tat thing, it becomes a bit out of control.
Stephen, our day's up. We've got a minute left in the show. Now, just repeating the podcast, of course, Cocaine Inc. Inside the Global Drug Business. We're here with Stephen Drill, and we appreciate that. A lot of his articles in the Daily Telegraph and the Herald Sun. Geez, it must be hard not to be obsessive about the whole thing, Stephen, is it? Like it's heavy stuff, isn't it?
It's interesting to join all the dots, and that's, I think, what we've been able to do in the podcast, especially. We've had some really, it's been great working with the Times as well.
Are you going to go back over to Colombia?
If I can, yeah.
Oh,
it depends.
You felt safe?
You feel, Well, when we went there, we had police guard the whole time, so there was guys with. Colombia felt okay. Mexico is a mess.
Yeah.
Like we were with guys who had 200 spare bullets on their chests the whole time. They were doing we drove for 2 hours from point A to point P, and they had a machine gun on the back of their ute, and they did head checks the whole time.
Oh, wow. Episode 1, A Shooting at Christmas. Episode 2, The Sweet Song. And Episode 3, The 64 million % Markup, which is out tomorrow. Just repeating, it is called Cocaine Inc. Inside the Global Drug Business. A stack of text coming through. So thank you so much, Stephen. We appreciate your time coming in to join the Run Home with Joel and Fletch.
Thank you, Dr. Drill.